Sup homies, I remade this Space Cathedral remix and I want to teach you guys how to do drop phrasing variations like Jekyll and Hyde, or just like the pros. I learned a lot remaking this and I think you guys should definitely see what's going on. Let's check it. Let's go. Okay, I hope you guys like that. That's basically what I learned while referencing his track and trying to get it as close as possible to the energy and the layering and the mixing and mastering, just like that big, impactful. Look first at the timing. We're going to have to analyze the timing. So this full drop is in 32 bars, which is a normal time. Halfway through is the 16, and we're going to mark that 16 as well. We'll call it the halfway point. And then we can mark the end of the drop as well. We really want to understand. So the first 16 and then the last 16 will be very similar. The first 16 is what you're usually going to be working with. And then you have two different 8-bar sections within your first 16. So basically we can call this one B. The halfway mark can be C. This one can be D. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 main phrases in our 32-bar section. If we look within the first 8 bars, when I highlight, you can look at the bottom left where it says length 8 to see. This is what I'm looking at. Within the first 8 bars, this is where we have basically everything going on. We want to find the section that loops. So there's going to be basically a main motif. It's going to loop back around. We want to kind of find that call and response pattern. So let's listen here. Boom, there. So for the first 8 bars, we are playing a nice call and response pattern, which is the call. We have these heavy brass shots, which then leads into our response, which is the main bass. We're going to break down each section individually because there's a lot going on within each section. So let's open it up. This is written in, I believe, C sharp minor. We're going to check here. What's C sharp minor? One of the main things is that when he drops it, it's not going straight into the response. Usually you would just, go straight into your drop right there, but instead he uses the brass motif, which is from the intro, to make it even more impactful and add more energy. So we go 2 bars of brass. The brass is doing something special as well. We are walking down the scale all the way to C sharp. C sharp's over here. We basically walk down the scale. So as soon as we end up to the response at the drop, it's a C sharp note. So it ends up perfectly and resolves home perfectly. Cool. The main bass here and the brass will be in my Patreon if you guys want that. So check the Patreon if you want to download some goodies. The first section here, when the response happens, starts with a brass hit, which is a C sharp brass hit. So it still doesn't go straight into the response. It goes straight into like a call. And then these little fill sections. He's using this full 8 bars. First 2 bars is going to be brass. And what we're doing here is just basically simple quarter note rhythm. That's like the main rhythm. So you see the sub and the main bass is just going regular quarter notes, like usual rhythm. And this is the main thing. So see there's a sub here for the brass. Remember, the phrase has a call and response structure, but we use these other sections to actually add more energy and make sure it's not repetitive. So all these little fills, all these extra calls. We're cutting up space, cutting up silence from the main bass, and then going back to the brass. And of course the brass is playing C sharp, just the root note. It keeps it really clean. Now in this section we have this sound. So you'll see the first part of this 8 bars is going to be the brass. Next is going to be a brass and some basses. The next bar, the next 2 bars is double brass and the basses. And then the next one is 1 brass and a vocal sample. So instead of us having just the main bass play throughout the whole 8 bars, which is usually what you hear, Jekyll and Hyde goes the pro elite level and adds these different variations in each 2 bars to add more intensity, to add more energy, to reduce the predictability. But this one right here, this is our main one. It's just 1 brass and then all basses. And then we have to switch it up a little bit, so we add 2 brass. And we remove the bass when the brasses are playing. Then we switch it up again a little bit and we do a brass and the vocal. And then we can loop back. So then essentially, once you created your first 8 bars here, you would duplicate that 8 bars and then you would start making more variations. So let's listen to the vocals playing. So when you hear the brass, in between the brasses we have some vocals. And then like little fill vocals. But in the next phrase, once we loop it back, the next 8 bars at B, that's what we're looking at here, the vocals will change up. So now 2 different vocals, and this is what we're using to add variation in this. And then you'll see this phrase is literally the exact same as the other phrase. These 3 sections are the same as these 3 sections. We got 1 brass, got a double brass, got a brass and a vocal. And as you see here, we switched out the vocal. All we did to add variation to this phrase was change the vocals up here. Everything else essentially stayed the same. Now we have our first 16. Then that would sound repetitive if we just duplicated that. So during the halfway point, which is here at C, we start to switch it up a lot and start adding sustained basses, new basses, more energy. Let's check it out. Okay, cool. So in C, basically, we would copy the first phrase, phrase A. We'd paste it here. We'd keep the same vocal samples and the same brass. But we need to start adding variation. So that's why we add this sustain bass. And you start to add more basses on the offbeats. So the 0.2s and the 0.4s are your offbeats. And then you can have more basses playing just to speed up some energy. And see, the sussies laid out real specific, right? We want the sussie to only play during the drop sections. We don't want it to play during the brass, so it's cut out during the brass sections. And then one of the main things here is in the halfway point, we switch up the sub. So the main sub now becomes a sustained sub rather than this quarter note sub. When you switch up the variation of your sub as well, that will make a huge difference in the track. With the phrasing, same 8-bar sections here. Now the first sustained section is going to sound one way, and then our second sustained section will sound another. Let's listen to the differences on each sustained section. Cool. So if you hear the sustain starts to wiggle and change in this phrase. So using an auto pan at different rates to actually make the sustain wiggle and wobble, which is a variation from the sustain in the previous section. But it's still going to be doing the same rhythm, except it's cut off more at the end here. So at the end of the drop, we're going to cut a pretty nice section of silence and add some effects. That creates even more variation at the end of the drop and at the end of this phrase to then lead us in back to our brass motif. And then into the breakdown. Now that is an extra 2 bars. So the first 32 bars is this, and then he adds the extra 2 bars of motif, which is just an extra. He's going the extra way, and then adding in the breakdown. Super, super clean transition. This is what the pros do, for real. The phrasing is quite simple though, once you look at it and break it down. So you can start to learn how to make your phrasing and call and response the elite level. I hope this guys helps you out. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and keep it real, dog. Stay fresh. Peace out.